in reading a book about the history of the Catholic Church in Chicago, I came across a cartoon of an Irish immigrant, printed approvingly in the Chicago Tribune, sometime in the late 19th century. And there he stood, a short, pug-nosed, pot-bellied tramp, a boozer who needed a shave, whiskey bottle in hand, bowler hat, a garish, ill-fitting green suit, a button bursting in the middle. This caricature in a very respected newspaper. I forgot the caption, but it was degrading. Stereotyping, prejudice, perhaps more present in yesterday's world. African Americans portrayed so cruelly in the movie Birth of a Nation, a white woman saved by the KKK. And in the movies always, you had blacks always stereotyped as Uncle Toms, shuffling along and subservient. And in the business world, so prejudiced against, so discriminated against. What a loss to all of us is racial prejudice. And then there are the Jews. Remember that the Holocaust was preceded by Shakespeare's Shylock and Dickens' Fagin, and by the ghettos, even in Rome, the city of the popes. Anti-Semitism endemic in every age, among every people. The Italians had to do recently with the Sopranos, as though the mafia identified who they were, and the never-ending supply of Polish jokes. During the summer of 1943, I worked in a defense plant, making veils for lifeboats. And I recall a poster of a grotesquely drawn Japanese soldier with the caption, "Shh, the enemy might be listening." Now, I don't know how this connected with anything. We didn't spot any Japanese troops prowling around the factory. But I do know that racial prejudice led the United States government to intern loyal Japanese Americans in camps that insulted their dignity and deprived them of freedom. Only with the Japanese, not with the immigrant Germans or Italians. Racial prejudice. And there were the immigration laws of the 1920s, limiting the number of people who could immigrate from Italy and from the Slavic nations. More than a hint of anti-Catholic bias here. The point of all this, a pervasive, shared, sometimes expressed conviction of so many people, don't expect anything but trouble from the likes of them. Them at a moment of time, maybe the Irish, the Poles, the Italians, the African Americans, the Jews, and now for people in our culture, and unfortunately sometimes in our own faith communities, Mexicans, Middle Eastern immigrants, and Muslims. Them, not part of us. Prejudice, stereotyping, separating them from us is sometimes hostile, sometimes not even recognized. When someone says, "My doctor's name is Aaron Goldberg. He's Jewish, you know." Really? No kidding. But what does his being Jewish have to do with anything? He has many identities. He's a doctor, a citizen, above all a human being, and a child of God. The good one does, and the evil as well, comes not from being part of this nationality or religion or ethnic group. It's because of who we are. If the compassion of the Samaritan is front and center in this afternoon's parable, on a more profound level, Jesus is challenging the scholar of the law in his prejudices. The Samaritan was religiously a heretic. His main object was not the temple in Jerusalem, but in Samaria. He was racially impure, from the stock of the Assyrians and the Jews who married centuries before. And he thought deep within himself, what good can come from this fellow? He's not one of us. But who was neighbor for this beaten, robbed fellow Jew? Why, of all things, the Samaritan. He also was among God's people. The Samaritan, born like all human beings, is in the image and the likeness of God. This is a primary truth that connects us with the Jewish community of faith and really with many other of the world's religions. The Samaritan lived the law. He lived kingdom values. And so the challenge of Jesus, not only to the Jews of his day, but to each of us in our ever-shrinking world community, they are we. The Spirit of God filled the mind and the heart of Jesus. And that's why from his mouth came those beautiful parables that are as alive today as they were 2,000 years ago, because they come from the heart of God. In the letter to the Colossians, the author exalts Jesus is the image of the invisible God. He is the firstborn. He is the model for all disciples. In him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. So what does God invite us to as disciples of Jesus? In the parables, Jesus brings down to earth what living in the kingdom means. Always for Jesus, God is the center. Always. God to be approached in prayer and in worship with profound reverence, with a sense of the majesty and the otherness of God. God from whom we come, in whom we live, to whom we are accountable, and to whom we shall go. But faith in this mystery is evidenced in immediate, ordinary ways of living. So here we are, and Jesus challenges us to faithful discipleship, to open our minds and our hearts, and then respond with compassion, not just with random acts of kindness, but with profound and predictable and gracious and generous acceptance of all people, especially in their needs. Compassion is the magic word for Jesus. He tells us what the good life is really all about. It's about compassion and sharing and caring. And so the Lord looks on us and he loves us and he challenges us. Okay, you've heard the word from me, now live it.